My name's Yvette Vaughan Jones. I'm Chief Executive of an organisation called Visiting Arts, and I was asked to chair the panel at the Open Method of Coordination from the EU on audience development through digital means. So we had an 18-month process of research looking at good practice across Europe, and we collect it together in a report.
It occurred to me that actually a lot of this is simple. It's counting people, and then it's finding out about those people and responding to what they like and don't like.
How can policies allow for fast changes to react to?
Well, that's a very good question.
Yeah.
They have to be open-ended policies. I think they have to be sets of protocols rather than absolute rules. So it's more direction of travel than a number of stops. It's the only way. If you try and guess what's coming through next, you will get it wrong. So I think policies need to be much more about the values and ways we approach work than what we do.
So they have to be not specific, they have to be more general and flexible.
And it's very frightening, it's scary for policymakers.
Yeah.
They fear that people will take advantage of it or steer it in a different direction. Policymakers have to become more brave and take more risks.
Yeah, so it's up to the policymakers to change it, to change.
Yes, and they need to be aware that it won't be easy for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what can institutions do to unblock barriers? This is a policy issue, and this is where I think we are lagging behind. I don't think the hierarchies in the institutions really see that that's their role. It's no longer to be the kind of rather directorial role, but it's to unblock the barriers.
We only have certain answers. We were saying that building capacity within organisations to react to the digital shift is the single most important element. We see it as something that will be ongoing. You can't retrain and then forget about it. Training and adaptation to change has to be built into everybody's work pattern.
The notion of instant feedback, do we listen to it? And should we? I mean, sometimes it's really poor quality feedback, isn't it? It's knee-jerk, it can be racist, it can be really badly thought through, it's not considered, it doesn't have an academic background to it. Should we listen to it?
I think that there is no question that feedback and interactivity is the way we are. Very traditional market research, you ask people, they will tell you, you do surveys, you can look at your audience figures, see which ones are growing, which ones are not growing. And that's very traditional market research and audience development. But the second part, I would say, is people tell you. People will tell you all the time. The feedback loop has got very short. The bigger question about that is how much notice should you take and do you take of that feedback? Because it can be people that shout loudly, it can be people with very inflammatory opinions that make a lot of noise, but it might not necessarily be helpful in making policy. So the two sides of listening to people, I think, is very different. One is a research project, and the other one is filtering what information you get, because it's not representative, that there are certain kinds of people that give you feedback. Not just young people, it can be older people with nothing else to do, who are bored in their sitting rooms, who are very digitally connected. But they're not representative either. They can be a very small group. So the difficulty in all this information that is coming back into institutions, telling them a lot about their collections and their programs and so on, how do you know which people to listen to? So that's a bigger question, a second question.
So how do they know?
I haven't got an answer to that. I think we'll have different paradigms, different market segmentation, and different ways of looking at that. I think we will evolve a whole kind of digital market segmentation, which hasn't been done to my knowledge yet. There's a little bit they call silver surfers, the older people that work on iPads, and digital natives and sub-digital natives. But it will become more sophisticated than that. And that's only about the attitude to digital. It's not about background, interests and so on. So there'll have to be a different kind of approach.
So here, live online transmission of performances are combined with hyperlinks to networks and background information in order to provide opportunities for audiences not just to watch, but to access information and interact with each other through live chat and comment streams during the performance.
How will we keep their interests? If we know what they are.
Yes. The answer to that is no different because it's digital than if it was analog. It's really understanding people, getting to have deep knowledge about them, reacting to their behaviours, stretching people, taking them out of their comfort zone, and giving them nurturing and interesting work that speaks to them. Now, all those phrases, I think you could say in the analog world. In that respect, people are the same, with needs, emotions, desires, ambitions, and aspirations. And it's those elements that we want to engage with, whether it's digital or analog.
And how do we find the digital natives in the organisations and how best to engage them? Well, most people, I think, realise that, it's the young people, not exclusively, that really do have far more access and energy in this field, and we have to just really be a lot more receptive.
There is a diminishing public purse. There's less public funding, and that's likely to diminish. At the same time, there's a huge increase in artists who are willing and able to work in a different way. And I think we have to build the skills of artists and creators to be more entrepreneurial, to work and behave more like businesses. I think we have to build the understanding that intellectual property is of value and can be monetized, and help small enterprises do that. I think it would be very good to help young creative entrepreneurs cross-subsidize their work with more creative work. The old model was an artist may work on their own and work in a shop or in a restaurant to subsidize their work. I think that's a big waste of talent. I think artists can see roles for themselves in business development, in facilitation in boardrooms, using their artistic skills to cross-subsidize work. So that's the first part of the question, which is how do we stretch the money to more artists? The second is what kind of policies will help develop digital work? And I think policymakers will have to make some hard decisions. So, for example, I think there's a real need socially to reach out to what we used to call hard-to-reach groups or marginalised groups. That can be socio-economic, it can be ethnic, it can be younger people, people with different abilities. And if that's the case, then funding can be very targeted, and the big opportunity for digital is responding to those questions. And I think that's a really important element going forward.